point, though, Paul, you've got Di Lee, who, of course, in Western Sydney, fought off Christina Keneally. And Di Lee has been mentored by Jenny George. You know, we talk about the fact that people in Western Sydney and workers and whatever have been left behind by the Labor Party. How much of an opportunity is there going forward to do almost that sort of teal thing that has happened in the eastern suburbs, but the Di Lee version through Western Sydney and Western Melbourne, etc.?
Absolutely. Look, I certainly think that there's going to be a couple of other people that are going to get close to what Di Lee's been able to do in Western Sydney, because the reality is that for a long time, someone from Central Casting was able to be dropped on insert out of suburban area because people reflexively vote Labor, they'll turn around and do it. But I think people in all forms of politics, be it sort of, you know, the 35 plus women in teal seats, they want somebody who looks like them, right? And the old-fashioned sort of person who used to have a trade union history way back when doesn't necessarily look like them. That said, I think there's two issues that are going to cause that creation. One, it is immigration, and we'll get to that in a second, but it's immigration, cost of living, that I think is going to pop up, say, your local mayor, somebody like that who's well known to an area, but we don't talk about on TV shows like this. The second issue, I think, is not this election, next election. Can I just put believe it or not, a pin in a debate to come, is that the second Sydney airport is going to have 24-hour noise. Now, the major Sydney airport that's there now has a curfew. So the people who live in the Prime Minister's electorate, well, they get to be able to sleep peacefully after 10 p.m. People who are going to live in Western Sydney are going to have 24-hour noise. And I think you're going to see the candidates that go close this time, or at least start to send their message that Labor's screwing you over, in 3 years' time, when it's 24-hour noise over the top of your head, that'll be the final push. So I think it's a two-election strike strategy, but I think it'll happen.
As for the nuclear stuff, though, I mean, Joe, why doesn't the Labor Party just say, look, we don't believe it is economically viable, we don't think it's going to happen, which is what they've said many times, but we will lift the moratorium and let the market decide?
That's what I think they should do, and I wrote a column to that effect just last week saying, look, if it's going to fail, let it fail, but let it fail in full public view so everyone can see it, and that will actually be good for Labor. The numbers, as far as I can tell, don't stack up at the moment because we simply have not got these small modular reactors, which could be game changers. They're simply not there yet. They're just not there. They're a few years away, it seems, before they're ready to go to market, and then we'll see what they can do. But, you know, the idea that you would ban something sight unseen before it's actually got there is just madness. And I think you should always be sort of, technology agnostic with things that are as important as climate change. And Jenny George is interesting in that even though she's a creature of the left, she is someone who has to go home to the Illawarra, to Wollongong that she represents, and look those workers whose necks are on the chopping block in the eye and say, don't worry, your job's going to be safe, or we're going to find you a new one. And this was her big sort of Grail Castle moment, if you like, where she was looking through all these stats and saying, well, where are all these new jobs coming from? It's no, and again, and I'm all for climate change and doing something about it. I'm all for reaching those targets.
Did you just say you're all for climate change, Joe?
I'm all for doing something about climate change. But it has to be, it can't be that you're just saying, well, you have to, my job's going to be fine, but you have to sacrifice your job. And it also can't be where you say, well, yeah, you'll lose your job, but this other job will be created, unless it's a job that is created in the same area for the same people. Correct. And that is what it has got to be. And Freya's absolutely right. The Labor Party has been going through an existential crisis pretty much for the past half a century, but it's getting really acute now because the biggest ideological obsession for the inner city left of the party, the elite upper middle class left of the party, is climate change, which is the one thing that is of the biggest threat to the traditional blue working class, which is why, for example, the Australian Workers' Union, which is the biggest blue collar union in the party, is pro-nuclear, because they see this threat coming like a freight train down the road.